Hello, everyone. Scienter here with a little bit of a blue light on my face from this microphone. But we're going to ignore that. This is my life and channel update for August of 2025. Yes, August. I don't know if I feel like it's August already or finally August. Years are weird. Time is weird. Perception of time is weird. Anyway, we're here to talk about this month. So a number of different things have been going on, and I kind of want to do it somewhat topically. So let's just start with media. That's a big topic. So just looking over my notes, I finished my read-through, my most recent read-through. I don't know how you want to call this. Reading So I'm a Spider, So What. I finally had all of the light novels, and I did a technically what was my first read-through from the very first book to the very to the very last book. Because when I first started reading the light novels, I started with book 2 because I had read the first issue of the manga, and then the library that our library system here, I was borrowing them from, makes it a little ambiguous, not entirely, but a little ambiguous of whether or not something is a light novel or a manga, and so I accidentally got the light novel book 2 and loved it, and then read the whole thing, rest of it, and then got book 1 and read that, but I didn't have the other one, so then we don't need to relitigate that. But I finished reading through that series, enjoyed it a lot. Again, I'm looking forward to reading it again in the future. But I have other things I'm reading right now. I had posted on Blue Sky about being interested in reading The Overlord, and That Time I Reincarnated as a Slime. Slow down, enunciate. That Time I Reincarnated as a Slime. I think there's a got in there in the title. Whatever, it doesn't matter. It's high concept as title. Very Japanese thing to do. Light novels. So I've been reading those. My sister saw that I had made mention of that and checked out the first one of each from the library for me. So I read the first Overlord light novel and the first That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime light novel. Decided I'm going to read through Overlord first. It's the shorter of the two. 16 books, as opposed to, I think, this That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime is at 22. But I really enjoyed the first That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime book, so I'm looking forward to reading the rest of them. And I can definitely see, I read an interview on Crunchyroll closer to when the anime for That Time, or So I'm a Spider, So What got released from the author of that light novel series. And they were saying that That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime was an inspiration. And when I had been rewatching the anime for That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, man, these titles are so freaking long. Like I could see that thematically, but also stylistically, they are very similar. Which, given that I quite enjoyed the style of So I'm a Spider, So What, means that I also quite enjoyed the style of That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. Man, reincarnated in Japanese is like tensei, and therefore is much shorter. Much more of a mouthful in English. But anyway, Overlord has been interesting to read. It's definitely a different style. And like as a series, I find it very interesting because the protagonists or the main characters or whatever are just very much so villains. Like it's not trying to hide that. But they're villains in like a very typical sort of way, in that they care very much about their people, and everyone else is just like a tool, maybe a toy, just something to be used, rather than people. And it's very interesting. Like there's so much about it that is really interesting structurally, and the world building is really interesting. A lot of the characters are interesting, but it's also kind of just a very depressing story in some regards, because your main character is a villain who does villainous things, and the series, at least the anime in particular, doesn't shy away from that. I haven't gotten to the points where that really comes out yet in the book, so for those who are curious, it seems like the first season of the anime, there's 4 seasons of the Overlord anime. It seems like the first one covers the first 3 light novels, which is kind of what I would maybe expect, roughly in terms of rate. So I have been enjoying reading it. The first book is a little bit rough because the main character has a lot of imposter syndrome. Um, and I kind of like characters who it's it's confidence in the way that a person owns who they are, because this is a type of imposter syndrome where the main character, uh, Momonga Ainz, whatever you want to call him, feels like he has to play a particular archetype, and is very fearful of what happens if he doesn't. So it sounds like imposter syndrome, um, but it's there's definitely a degree where that kind of drags down, especially the first book for me. It's not as big of an issue in the latter ones, but you definitely like it is definitely a dark series, and it's one that I find very interesting. But I wouldn't like. It's complicated. It's complicated. My feelings about it. So we'll see how I feel once I finished reading it. I'm on book 3 right now, for those who are curious, and book 4 and 5 are hopefully on hold soon at the library. So hopefully I'll be reading them soon. But let's see. There's also like the anime that I've been watching. So I know I'll just cover this very briefly. I feel like I've talked about them each time. There's a number of series that I'm just kind of like letting bank up and plan to watch once the season is over. So like the 4th season of The Rising of the Shield Hero, I think is the name. I don't know. People probably just call it Shield Hero. But I'm just letting that one accumulate, and I'll just watch that in one go. Same thing with like Dan to Dan and Kaiju number 8. But the ones that I've been actively watching, there have been quite a few that I've been quite enjoying. The Water Magician, I've been really enjoying quite a bit. It's a very slow, I guess, is the way that I want to say it. Like, not in a bad way. Like, I feel like people calling something slow often is negative, but it kind of is slow in the way that something is kind of luxuriating in taking its time. Like, I remember the Star Trek Picard feeling kind of slow in the same sort of way, but not necessarily like that was a bad thing. Just like they're taking more time to let things sort of marinate and not trying to rush to action, if that makes sense. Um, and so like I've been enjoying it, but it's also been one of those like I keep wanting more, because it's doing a good job of getting me invested in sort of the setting and the characters and wanting to see how things develop. And it's taking its time developing multiple threads at once, sort of thing. Um, I've also been quite enjoying Secrets of the Silent Witch. It's very cute. It's just a very cute show. In that one, the protagonist, Monica, is just she's very she lacks a lot of social confidence. And it's very interesting. I've been seeing because another one that I've been enjoying has been I forget the exact name, but it's like something like The Hero and the Three Assassin Princesses or something like that. Which I've been enjoying that one too. But they both kind of have a main character that is just like lacking in social confidence, and that's kind of an interesting sort of theme that I feel like I've been noticing a lot lately, and stuff. And I'm wondering if that's reflecting some broader feelings in Japan. Um, so that would be something that'd be interesting to know. But Secrets of the Silent Witch is just very cute. Like it's animated in a very cute sort of way as she's the main character. Monica is learning to grow sort of beyond herself in a way, beyond her previous limitations and getting to know people and things. So it's been fun. I've been enjoying that one quite a bit. I've also been enjoying Lord of Mysteries, which is from China. But it's just interesting hearing a different language with the subtitles on. I personally prefer the sound of Japanese to the sound of Chinese, but that's just a personal bias. I definitely feel like I hear a lot more Chinese in my day-to-day life, as it were. That's neither here nor there. But it has such a strong sense of aesthetics. So the basic premise with it is somehow a guy winds up in sort of a different world that has a very Victorian, like Victorian England sort of aesthetic to it. Um, and it's got sort of a lot of a lot of his world building is based on sort of occult kind of concepts, but it has just an immaculate sense of aesthetics. It does a really good job of capturing that sort of feel of like epicness and stuff. It actually, in that regard, I'm reminded some of what when I started watching Wheel of Time on Amazon. After the era of a bunch of Marvel movies where everything is treated super flippantly and is like, oh no, this is taking itself seriously, and how refreshing that was. But it's kind of a similar sort of emotion. But yeah, Lord of Mysteries. It's this guy is just trying to figure out what's going on, right? That's this really like, how did I end up in this situation? How can I get back home? And what's going on? It's kind of like fundamentally what's going on, but it has a lot of interesting stuff with like superpowers and a really strong sense of aesthetics. That just yeah, it's very impressive. Um, see, I also have really been enjoying it, which this surprised me, but I've really been enjoying Ugly Mug Epic Fighter, I think is the name. But like, its premise didn't sound very good. Like, it was like, I'll give this a try and see how it is. But it actually is like, there's a lot of sweetness to it because the main character is not who I like personality wise what I expected. Um, so like, yeah, it's a very interesting show. Like the basic premise is that people basically get a like web page that lets them be like, hey, do you want to like reincarnate in another world sort of thing? But this sort of reincarnation where it's like reformulated in another world, or like you're not summoned just as you are, but you're not like born, if that makes sense. You're just kind of remade in another world. Um and then they have a field where they can like select their stats and they can write in special notes and that can affect how many stat points they get. So, the main character is a guy who's just he's very like wise and intelligent and has a big heart, but he got burned really hard and like that affects what he put into things. And so it's just interesting the way the character dynamics work. And it's nice to have a main character who like clearly cares about people to the degree that this one does. So it's actually like not what I was expecting. And I've quite been quite enjoying that one as well. Um, there's a bunch of others that I've been enjoying, so those are some of the ones that have been rattling around my head. There's a bunch of other anime too that I've kind of like watched or rewatched. But I'm looking at the time, I've definitely spent a lot of time with that. There was, however, a show that I watched that wasn't an anime, which was Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. So my sister read the book for it, or the book. And so BBC didn't the BBC did an adaptation of it around a decade ago, I guess. And so she'd heard somewhere and wherever she hangs out online, Tumblr, I guess, that the adaptation that somebody had really liked the adaptation. So she was curious about it, and so she read the book. It's a very long book, but we take walks together that are like 45, 50 minutes long usually, and she spent 2 of those like summarizing the book to me. So and then she said, oh, she was getting the miniseries from the library. It's a 7-episode, 1 hour long episodes, and she said she's getting that from the library, and I said, oh, I want to watch that with you. So I watched that with her, and I really enjoyed that. Very interesting sort of world building going on with that one. Again, it's taking place in England, in kind of the early mid 1800s, more early, the first half of the 1800s, and it has to do with magic and has a fictional historical character named the Raven King who had brought magic to England and all sorts of things, and it's a very interesting series. That's just what's the best way to kind of describe it? It's basically like two different approaches to trying to understand a topic, I guess you could say, and like two different, very, very different personalities. Because Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell are both practical magicians, which means they're magicians who actually do magic, as opposed to theoretical magicians who just talk about magic. And so it's a very interesting series to watch. See, there's also been on the media front several games. I mean, I've been playing more Guild Wars 2. I also finished playing Princess Peach Showtime. This is because Playframe was like going to do a playthrough of it, and I had left my playthrough off partway through, and I wanted to, actually finish seeing the game myself. The game itself it definitely feels like the reason why I stopped my playthrough of Princess Peach Showtime was because it just wasn't appealing to me that much. Like, it was fine, but not like grabbing me. The basic structure of it is you have stage plays and you take on different roles for those plays, and so they kind of come in different series. I actually really quite enjoyed the ending of it, but the game itself feels like it's kind of designed for kids, which like I would absolutely. It would be a great like early game for a kid, I think. But it is lacking some of the depth that I want from games. So, but I enjoyed finishing it up, and it has a lot of interesting stuff that it does because the different roles do function quite differently in many regards. So, for example, there's a detective where you have to try to figure out clues and solve mysteries and stuff. There's a baker one where you have to decorate cakes and bake cookies. Very simple mechanics with those, but it's different styles, right? There's a mermaid one where you control fish. Somebody is comparing it to Pikmin, which it is kind of like a Pikmin light. Then there's a number of different combat ones. There's also like a ninja one where there's an emphasis on stealth. So it does a good job of like changing up, though. Like I said, it's mechanically fairly simple. It's like, here's your jump button and your interact button, or your do stuff button, I should say. So, but I finished playing through that, and of course I've been playing more Night Rain. I've almost, as far as I'm aware, finished up each character's story. As long as getting the Remembrance outfit means that you finished a character story anyway. I just need to finish the Recluse, but I am not very good at Recluse. I feel like Recluse is extremely dependent upon what spells you're able to get access to, and therefore what staves you're able to, or seals you get access to, and it's just so it feels very RNG dependent, and there's probably some just details about playing it that I just haven't quite figured out. But I've been enjoying the game a lot. I do have one particular criticism of it, which is I feel like a lot of the Night Lords move around too much, and so I feel like a lot of time is spent chasing after them, which, I mean, is something in the favor of like Recluse or Iron Eye, somebody who's more ranged. But I do feel like a lot of time is spent chasing down the Night Lords to be able to actually attack them. But I have been enjoying the game. So I think that covers what I wanted to talk about in the media section. That was a lot, but other things, I did stream once this month. I do want to be streaming more, but I'm also... So I've had a lot of different projects that I've been doing. I have an updated music player that I've been working on. So I wrote the music player that I use, but there's other features that I'm realizing that I want that it doesn't have. And rather than expanding that one, I decided to write a new one because I wanted a lot of interface changes, and most of the thing is interface. Plus, I wanted to change a lot of how I was handling loading, because the way that I was handling loading before just felt very slow. Now that there's something that I learned in the process of working on this one that might be part of why it's slow, but realistically, a lot of the reason is because it's just trying to pull too much data from too many disparate places from the disk, and that's slow. So instead of doing that, I'm having one master file that contains everything. not going to be that huge. Like, yeah, but it's still, because I'm not loading from a bunch of different places, it's going to be faster because I'm not doing all those different disk accesses, and I'm hanging on to more immediate data and stuff. So, and then like I said, there's a lot of interface things that I've been wanting to change with it. So I've been wanting to try to get that project done, and I don't know, I've just how things kind of overlap in my brain. But I do find myself, as I'm thinking through things, I do want to like finish this playthrough of Guild Wars 1 that I've been doing with unlocking all skills. And because I want to do a playthrough of Middle Earth Shadow of War, because I had streamed Middle Earth Shadow of Mordor like several years ago, back when the Rings of Power show was first airing on Amazon. Airing as if we're broadcasting through the air. But I want to, kind of do things sort of sequentially. And then, like, I also want to do a playthrough of Guild Wars 2 where I play without the minimap. Because the minimap does a lot to navigation, and I want to actually learn the maps. So I've talked about this before. So anyway, I do want to, at some point later here, start doing that more, but it's going to be a little bit yet because I still want to finish up this music player program first. And then like another big project that I kind of undertook was, so I have some binders of Magic cards where what I've historically done with them is it's where I've kept like rares and then cards I'm more likely to play. But some rares are cards like Mudhole, which, for those not in the know, Mudhole is a very bad Magic card. And so these binders, like as I've been playing Magic, more sets have been coming out, and I've been wanting to put cards in there. I run into this problem where, I need more binder pages, but for whatever reason, those can be like, stores don't seem to stock them as much as I would expect, so it can be very spotty, and I didn't necessarily want to order them, and the binders themselves are kind of getting thick anyway. So I decided to get a box to put cards that were in the binders that I don't think I want to keep in the binders, so that could be rares like Mudhole. I know I keep going to that one, but I legitimately had a Mudhole in there. For those who don't know, it's like I think it's 2 in a red instant exile all lands from target player's graveyard, something like that. It's not good. It's from like Onslaught probably. I cannot fathom, like, there are some strategies where that would be very helpful, like to counter them, but it's so niche. Like you could make that 1 red and it still wouldn't be good. Anyway, the point is, I got a box, and so I spent a bunch of time going through all my binders, pulling out cards, sometimes pulling out extra copies. Like Pyroclasm absolutely deserves to be in my red binder, but like, because I have a binder for each color, and then multicolored binder, and then a colorless binder. Plus, I technically have one that has a bunch of double-faced cards in it because I was sorting them separately, but now there's so many. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. The point is, I was going through my binders, removing cards to put into the boxes, and that was a whole process. And then there's cards that I pulled out of the binders, and I'm like, I don't think this actually deserves to be in the box. This is like, go back to when I was putting some cards in there, and it was like Kaladesh, the original Kaladesh, and is like, does this card that I put in here actually belong here? But like Pyroclasms, for example, I had so many copies of Pyroclasm. I was like, I don't need to have this many copies of Pyroclasm in this or in this binder. I can put extras in the box. So there's some where I just thinned out how many copies I had in there. There was just some where like I don't see myself, like, this card just doesn't deserve to be in the binder anymore. Sorcery speed, target creature control deals damage equal to its power to a target creature an opponent controls for 1 and a green. They have outclassed that several times now. So I don't need to keep that in the binder anymore either. There's just things like that where it's like, this doesn't really belong to stay here. So I also did a whole thing of like putting cards away in the big boxes where I keep the stuff that I don't actively want out in the binders where it's easier to get to because I'm more likely to play it. So yeah, it's been a whole process. So I also did that project. I don't know why I spent so much time talking about it, but it really burns out the brain because I keep those big boxes organized alphabetically, and it turns out like going through what is probably hundreds of cards and putting them away and having to like sort through them and figure out where they go alphabetically and stuff. It's very mentally taxing. Doing not in any given one, but like in aggregate, that much is quite tiring. So then I've also, let's see, been with my exercises that I've been doing with my sister. We're doing, getting to consistently 50 push-ups and 50 sit-ups, which I'm very happy about. 50 push-ups is like a lot, it turns out. But we just started this. Like, it's not even been a year of doing this yet. So it's been very exciting to see that progress. See that tangible progress. Sit-ups suck. Neither of us like them just because they feel like they take forever. But it's very exciting to see the actual progress of what we're able to do. And then I've been working on my story. So I'm just looking down at the list of things that have been going on. I think this is the last thing that I'm going to talk about for this month. So I have been working on. I guess I'll quickly just touch on this. Probably belongs in media, but Edge of Eternities came out, and the pre-release was like right at the very end. That I went to was right at the very end of July, so it was practically this month. I will. What I'll just say on it is Edge of Eternities. Like, I felt very dubious about it. During preview season. Especially the like space flavor didn't quite seem to fit or whatever. I wasn't liking how things were looking or whatever. And then I actually saw the cards in person and like got to play with them, and I like it a lot more now. So I've been quite enjoying that. I've done a few drafts in addition to the pre-release and have been overall enjoying the set a good deal. But anyway, so for my story, so I don't want to talk about too many details, but the overall premise does have a game-like world. I have my own reasons for why that's happening, and I quite like them. But what I have realized is that if you're going to have things like levels and stats and experience points, you kind of need to design a game in order to be able to write your story. I thought, like, I was thinking that I could kind of get some rough sense of things and kind of hand wave a lot of stuff. And, like, I figured out, like, okay, what do these kind of numbers mean in a practical, like, power level sense, right? Where are some of the limitations, things like that. But I hadn't really sat down and thought too much about the fact that, like, okay, I'm going to want different rates of development for different characters, and I'm going to need to kind of figure out what do those look like. And so I've just been having to do a lot more like game design than I was expecting, which sounds a little silly in retrospect, but there's a lot of stuff that you can abstract when you're writing, right? Like, you don't have to be a master swordsman to write about a master swordsman having a fight. You're probably, like, the more you know about actual sword fighting, the more realistic that's going to be, potentially, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your reader knows better anyway. Like, you can just kind of write stuff. It's what I mean is, like, especially if you're doing world building or whatever, you can kind of just make things work the way that you need them to. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't have consistency in logic. You should, but like, there's a lot of hand waving that you can do. Like, there's a lot of details you might not need to figure out. But what I was realizing is that the degree of hand waving that I'm comfortable doing is, like, there's a certain threshold, right? And in terms of wanting to, like, pin things down to make things, like, realistic is a weird word to use in a highly fictionalized story. But to kind of make the numbers make sense, I needed to actually, like, I don't need to get them exactly where they should be if this was actually real, but I need to get them in the right, like, ballpark. And that meant that I needed to figure out enough of the rules that was feasible. So, um, one of the big parts of that, just to kind of explain, there's a stat so one of the big things in this setting is stat growth rates. So whenever you gain experience or like gain a level, you gain stats according to your stat growth rates, and there's 10 different stats. I'm not going to go through all of them, but they affect various things, like how fast you are or whatever. There's a hit point stat that what that basically is an auto heal pool. So it'll heal your wounds and injuries and stuff, and drain your hit points, and that's how that works. So like there's this whole thing of like, oh, healing magic doesn't heal your body; it restores your hit points that heal your body. So it's an indirect sort of healing, things like that. Um, but what ends up going on is when you gain a level, you gain a certain amount of stats. How many stats is dependent upon a number of factors. So, for example, this is what species you are, which affects your overall, like, gives an overall multiplier because some species have shorter lifespans than others. Longer lifespan species get stats at a slower rate because they have more time to build up power, right? So it's actually compensating for short lifespans, not penalizing long ones, but it can kind of feel like that depending upon your point of view, right? Um, you'll find many of the truths we cling to depend highly on our own point of view, or whatever the Obi-Wan Kenobi quote is. So anyway, the point here is there's other things that affect your stat growth rates as well, and like what character class you have, because there's character classes that people take that also affects your stat growth rates. So maybe you're playing it, or maybe you are living as a mage, so your certain stats that have to do with being more of a physically offensive individual, you don't get so much. Whereas ones that are more attuned with being mages, you do. So just different growth rates like that. And then there's also like a training sort of thing where by doing things you can gain a little bit towards relevant stats that you're doing things, and kind of like how Skyrim works. For those who have played, well, probably the other Elder Scrolls too. I don't know. I've only played Skyrim of the Elder Scrolls games, and even that, not that much. But we're not here to talk about my Skyrim experience. The way that those work is like you swing your sword and you start getting proficiency in using swords, and that allows you to be able to get better at using swords, right? It's something to try to mimic real world experience. And so, like, there's a system that's kind of like that, where doing things that use the stats, like spending HP to restore your body slowly gets you a little bit more HP. It takes a lot, but it will slowly improve, your total amount of HP. And you do that enough, and you start. There's 3 tiers of passive skills that improve how much your stat growth rates for any individual stat are. So like I have all of these different factors. There's also just your inherent talent for different things that can play a pretty substantial role in how quickly any given stat levels up or improves or whatever. So your stat growth rates, to summarize: species, innate talent, character class, and how much you've sort of trained or used that stat. So that affects how much your stats grow as you gain levels. And what ends up like with that, if I want to try to figure out, okay, what are actual good values for this? What should this look like? How quickly should people be accumulating stats and things like that? I realized that I was running into a situation where I needed hard numbers. Like I'd been trying to avoid needing to figure out hard numbers, and I realized I can't not get hard numbers. I need some hard numbers with all of this. Because I can't. I was introducing some characters that had been around for like 20 years prior to everyone else coming up, and like the sort of primary cast or whatever, and I needed to figure out how strong they were compared to everyone else, and I realized it's completely unmoored. I have no idea. And so I began like trying to figure out, okay, if I go into a spreadsheet and I try to calculate this stuff out, and I'm like, this is way too freaking complicated for me to figure out how to calculate in a spreadsheet. Maybe somebody who is a spreadsheet wizard could, but I ain't one of those. So I did what some people like me might do, and I opened Visual Studio and I began writing a program to help me figure it out. So at this point, like, it's been, looking at my notes here, I think it's been about 2 weeks. Something like that. I'm not quite sure exactly because I'm not digging through everything, but something like that. Um, but I've finally kind of gotten it to the point where I think most of the major functionality I need is in, and I can like begin testing and tweaking numbers, and I've already done a little bit of that actually in the process of making it. But like, uh, so many little things where it's like, oh wait, no, this is just outrageous. But I need to, and like, it doesn't have to be a perfectly balanced system, right? That's one of the other things. Like this, I'm not making an actual game where I have to like balance things for players. Like this is just, it can, I don't have to worry about QA, things like that. So it's not like fully making a game, but it's like making the bones and putting on a lot of flesh. It's at least making a caricature of a game, right? Um, enough that you can kind of like get a feel for what it looks like, even if it's not functional in a technical sense, in the sense that there's no actual game to play. But it's finally like at the point where like I can like work through all of these details and begin getting a sense for, okay, how should these characters be? What should their stats be like at this point? And that might change how I do some of the writing, because I'm probably going to tweak some elements of things now that I have a way of actually tracking hard numbers. But it's been a whole process putting that together. So I do highly recommend, by the way, everyone learn how to program, so that way you can make little utility apps like this for yourself, or even just understand how computers work, and so you can like get more of a sense of how easy it can be to change things, how hard it can be to change things. Sometimes those are different depending upon the architecture of the program you've written. Sometimes the way you wrote one program makes it easy to change a certain thing and hard to change another thing. And then you write another program a different way that reverses those. But it's been a whole process. So that's another thing that I have been working on a bunch, which I've also put the music player on hold, because trying to hold two different code bases in your head at the same time is confusing. But anyway, that's been this month. I know I've talked a lot about a lot of different things, and there's even more things I could have talked about, but I didn't. That's just how it goes, I guess. But it's been a good month overall, I would say. So I'm looking forward to some of the things that are coming up, like Silksong's surprise announcement. I'm just gonna go ahead and say I did play through Hollow Knight on this channel back when I was trying to do Let's Play type content. So if you want to see me play Hollow Knight, that does exist. I'm probably not going to directly link to it. Maybe I will. Look in the description, see if I did that or not. But I'm not planning on recording my first playthrough of Silksong or streaming it or anything. There's just going to be a lot of competition there, and it just doesn't matter that much to me to try to do. Part of me kind of wants to, but not enough to actually go through the process. So I'm sure Playframe will be doing a playthrough of it. If you want to watch somebody's first playthrough, that would be a good one to watch, I'm sure. But I do want to make sure I am playing it so I can get out ahead of their playthrough of it. So I'm looking forward to that coming out next month. But, you know, the Guild Wars 2 expansion and all sorts of other stuff. So anyway, thank you all very much for watching. It's been a long one, I know, longer than normal, but it's a lot to talk about for some reason. So until next time, everyone, take care and goodbye.